Locked in. Let's start.
How's your week going?
It's going all right. I'm getting over an illness, so a lot of time in bed still, but overall pretty good. What about you?
I'm all right. I can't complain. It's been I just moved into a new apartment, which has taken a lot of my energy and mental capacity, but still been able to figure things out. But it's good. Things are good. But yeah, excited to get you on the horn here. Um, talk all things data, talk all things airdrops, quotient, things you're working on, and hearing your story. Pre, Web3, what attracted you to it? We'll cover a lot today.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. So I guess we should probably start, I guess, around like 2015, 2016, like when you were getting into the workforce in the real world. What were some of the things that you were working on, experiencing? What was the first step out of school that like got you into data in the first place?
Yeah, so I studied Middle Eastern studies and philosophy, and I learned Farsi. So when I graduated, I was looking for jobs as a intelligence analyst focused on Iran. And the first kind of experience I had working with data in a serious way was as a like Iran intern at a think tank focused on Iran's military, and they had access to Palantir. So I got trained on Palantir and used it to perform research and do investigations. And at the time, I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. So I'd like stay late to like play around with it and like learn more about the features and like create my little investigations and share them with the team. And then I left the think tank and got a real job at a company that provides data to help with sanctions compliance and export control compliance. So, like, if you imagine like the global financial system and the global like web of commerce, there's companies and nonprofits that are operated by like say the Russian military or the Chinese military or the Iranian military, or they're a charity that's a front for a terrorist group. And if you're a bank or a business or the government, you might want to know who those organizations are so you can mitigate risk. So, like a bank would use our data to screen all their transactions for bad actors. And then when they got a hit, it would be like, this company has such and such label applied by Caron. And this label means that they're a fund company for the Chinese military. And there's potentially like legal consequences for doing this. So I started as an analyst, like investigating the networks. And then I was like, like this seems like kind of, I don't want to say a dead end career path, but I'd meet people who were like 20 years older than me. And they were just like an expert in like some branch of the Iranian military and all the generals in it. And like they would have like the same title as me and get paid roughly the same as me. And I was like, I don't want to be like that guy like in the movies where like the hero it's like we need to figure this out about like the Iranian nuclear program, like Jones, like pull everything we have on it. Like I didn't want to be Jones. I wanted to be like the hero. So I was like, okay, well, we have like this big knowledge graph and we do all these like fancy analytics on it and do all this like data stuff. And like I have this interest in it. So I learned Python. I learned how to work with graph databases. I moved over to the product team where like I led kind of like I worked pretty closely with the sales team to like build integrations for people to bring on the data, respond to client requests for like how the data needed to be structured or enriched, like joining the sales teams on like pitches to like be the guy who like present the case studies and speak to the data. Did pretty well at that. Company was growing. I got promoted to like director of product. So I built out our data team, like hired data scientists and data engineers and like quality assurance analysts to like scale our ability to collect more data and reconcile it with the data that we already had and like add analytics to it to like enrich it and integrate it with our UI, deliver it to customers, so on and so forth. So like was actually doing pretty well at that. It was a pretty chill job at that point because I was like one of the first employees and like I was generating a lot of value, kind of could do like what I wanted to do. Um, but I was also kind of bored because I didn't want to get stuck in like this national security niche because I was like, I get paid to like identify risk in like these other countries. Like I've never been to them. I have no real skin in the game. It kind of feels like white collar welfare, especially when you look at like how in many like there are cases where like sanctions and export controls are effective, but it's usually temporary. Because I mean, if you look at Russia, for instance, like they invaded Crimea in like 2014, so we did sanctions, and then they did a bunch of other stuff that we didn't like, and we did more sanctions, and then they invaded Ukraine, and we did more sanctions, and it really hasn't adjusted their behavior that much, but it's enriched a lot of people who work in the national security complex. So like you can have a debate about whether or not it's like a good thing. I don't think it's like evil, but it's just like I didn't want to like commit to spending the rest of my career there. And like I felt like at that point I'd been in Caron for maybe 5.5 years, 6 years. I was like, I'm turning into a lifer. Like I need to make some moves. Um, so I was interested in crypto and DAOs and DeFi. Like I did a little DeFi stuff during like DeFi summer. I started going to like the Bitcoin meetup in Los Angeles. Got connected with a guy who got me like a role as a contributor at this DAO, which is now defunct, called DX DAO, working on compliance stuff. And I was like, okay, I really want to like get into crypto, but like I don't even know how to like find one of these jobs. And it turned out ultimately that it was easier to raise money than it was to find a job. So I raised money with like this idea that I would start like Bloomberg for DAOs essentially, where we would track kind of like the health and growth of different DAOs, and people could use that as a resource to like invest. Community managers could use it as a resource to guide their growth strategies. People who wanted to contribute to DAOs could use it as a resource to like find DAOs to contribute to. Um, I think that it was a little bit early, and I also made just like a lot of mistakes in terms of like strategy and like staffing. Um, we were doing okay, but it was time to raise more money. And then the FTX collapse happened, and it just like wasn't a good situation. And I decided to like walk away. And then I worked at a nonprofit, like an educational nonprofit for a bit because I was like, crypto is really cringe. I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my career here. But I found in my free time, like when I was like, oh, I want to write, and then like 80% of my writing was like related to crypto in some way, and I was like, oh, I want to learn how to use um, I want to learn like front end development, and all the projects, my side projects, were like crypto related. So I was like, okay, like I want to get back into crypto, like I like the idea of what I was doing before, which with my old company, which is called Chainverse. Like maybe this is a better time to like retry that because now there's this network called Farcaster, which has all this open social data that's connected to on-chain data and all these communities that want to grow there. So yeah, that's kind of my path from when I graduated to now, which makes me feel old because it's been almost like 10 years.
Yeah, I think we graduated the same year, if memory serves me right. So I feel that deeply. But going back, there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things that I was curious about, because talking about your journey, one of the huge components of it is the fact that you were in you're a data centered individual. Like, so not in a data center, but like your path was really predicated on your understanding of data. So going into the uni, college, whatever you want to call it, that wasn't what it sounded like you were going in for. You were definitely like Middle Eastern studies, philosophy. That does not correlate to data, at least from where I'm looking at it. You get to a think tank, start learning more, start playing with Palantir. Would you say the minute that you started playing around with with Palantir that really opened your eyes to like new capabilities and, a new understanding of what your passion would then be in your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the type of data that I'm interested in is like more how to collect qualitative data at scale. So, for instance, like at my old company, Caron, like we would, like you can't just like tell your customer like, oh, this like company is bad, like it might be related to the Chinese military, because that's not very helpful for making a decision.
Right.
Like what they want to hear is like, this is a company that has sold like sensitive equipment to two or more companies which are majority owned by the Chinese government, right? So like at first, that's like a qualitative research challenge where you as an analyst are looking for these instances and like manually being like, okay, like where do I find this information? Where do I find that information? Like, okay, like I think I figured this out. And then what I'm really interested in is like, okay, well, once you figure out that process, like how do you automate it so the analyst can move on to the next thing? And I bring all that up because while I wasn't interested in kind of data, like numbers, math, like before, I was very interested in doing like research. So like in high school, I was like a nationally ranked like debater, and every day after school, I spent like 4 hours doing research on all these like arcane topics, and I really enjoyed it. And what Palantir did was provide a tool for me to not have to keep track of all this in my head. So like I could have like a document, and it would, I was interested in um the strategic thought industry in like Iran. So like scholars at universities and think tanks in the military, like what are the little cliques and how do they interact and everything. So I could like view like an academic journal article, and it would say, Bahram Mirzadi is a professor of X at University of Tehran, and he co-wrote it with these four other people. And with Palantir, I could just like highlight their names and like create little relationships. Like this guy's a professor here, this guy's a professor there. They wrote this article together, and then I don't have to hold it in my head anymore. It's in Palantir, and the rest of my team can interact with it. They can query it, like whatever. And when you start to add a lot of data, then you can start to notice like patterns, and um, you can be performing investigations and find people who meet very like specific criteria. So like my interest in data, so I would say, yeah, Palantir was like an introduction to like, oh, there's these tools that you can use to augment yourself and collaborate with others. But I've always been interested in kind of like researching and like mapping like networks, and who has influence in them, so on and so forth.
Got it. So some of the things that you were working on and what's the name? How do you pronounce it? The after the think tank, it starts with the K.
Charon,
Charon.
Charon.
So when you
It's
were
the Greek god who would bring people to the underworld.
got it. So you were basically exposing all the bad guys. It's not that you were responsible for bringing them in. All you all were doing was essentially saying, here's the data, here's the proof, this is why you should be flagged. And then additionally, you should probably take action. So you were never the person to be the deciding factor on that. You were just providing the evidence, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, like, we wouldn't even like tell them to take action. We would just map like what we saw as the risk and exposure, and then it was kind of up to them to make a decision. And we would add labels to things, but they're generally based off of like regulatory guidelines. Like, I don't want to get too into it because it's
Yeah.
like not super relevant to this audience. But yeah, I mean, there's like this needle you thread of like when you're working with data and like wanting to provide people like with like the data, and to be objective. But then like people don't really want that. They kind of want to be told what to do. So, but you don't want to tell them what to do, for various reasons. So eventually you get sucked into providing like additional enrichment and context that is supposed to help them to be able to make a decision without telling them what to do. But I find it to be like very political, frankly. Like if you're smart and you don't want to get blamed for stuff when it goes wrong, like a lot of the time when you show people data, it shows some things they don't want to see, and that like makes certain stakeholders like look bad. and then they like argue with you and are like, you should be doing it differently and like blah blah blah, right? And this happens like all the time. And some people are more like, I'm just gonna like, do what I'm told. But I have issues with authority. So the reason I'm like not working as like a data analyst or product manager or working on data or whatever is because I really don't like the political side of it, and I kind of like enjoy building stuff more. So yeah.
Well, I think that's a good segue, and that brings us to more relevance, for the audience that we're speaking in front of, and thinking more about how Quotient is functioning and taking those past experiences and applying value to the Farcaster community. I think a lot of people have seen the leaderboard. A lot of people have seen the matrix that is on the mini app and how it can, show you who your influence is on and also who influences you. All of that's very well and good. And then side conversations that we've had, the thing that excites me about Quotient is the fact that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And not to downplay the value that that's immediately brought and showcased in your creativity of, interpreting data. But I think with that, and then even just speaking on your previous experience with Karen and, utilizing Palantir and how that comes into the application that you're bringing today, I think that there's something to be said about understanding the data that's happening, on the Farcaster protocol, and what you can do with that. So I think, like with whatever you're comfortable sharing, just I guess like beyond what you see today with the credit score, like the Farcaster credit score that you've come up with, we could talk about that if you'd like a little bit, just to see the like ranking and how that is factored in, but then also like how you can take the granular of looking at the individual and like what their interests and things are that you're able to observe, but then holistically looking at it from, channels or, token launches and how that information should be applicable to whatever they're building and how that can be of value, not only for them, but then additionally, how that's of value to me as someone that's participating on the platform, having someone that's able to like streamline that information so that I'm getting stuff in front of me or I'm able to participate in stuff that I immediately want. Because I think, and this is very long winded, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, but like one of the things that I think Dan and V and the rest of the Merkle team are faced with on Farcaster is they need new users. And there is a lot of growth that the challenge right now is growth and being able to understand the likes, the dislikes, the things that keep us on. I think all of that information is right in front of us, but how we interpret it, I think, is the most important part. So I know that's pretty long winded, but I think Quotient solves for a lot of things, not to, you know, put the whole world, not to make you Atlas and put all of the data, problems on your shoulders. But I think there's a lot that you can address and solve with what you're building with Quotient.
Hopefully.
Hopefully,
I'm
no
betting my
pressure.
career on it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, so I mean, it's interest your characterization of like the leaderboard is interesting because it's like I don't want to say it's like performance art, but I would say that the last time I built a company, I had this idea in my head of like what people would need, and it was pretty detached from reality, and it was actually a lot more complicated than what people ended up buying to start. So there's like a lot of like wasted resources. Um, so this time I was kind of like, I don't want to like bring on more people to help. I don't want to like post manifestos with a bunch of ideas about like how I think like the space should be and like what's possible. I kind of just want to like put the minimum out there necessary to find people who are interested in using data to grow their businesses and are kind of like I like fellow travelers like intellectually ideologically about like the promise of this open data. And then once I found those people, to build custom solutions for them to solve their problems and then use what I learned to build the scalable product. So that's what like the leaderboard has functioned as this way to like attract, fellow minded people, and establish that like I can work with this data. Um, and the result from that has been me developing a platform around the idea of essentially identifying who the influencers and micro influencers are in your community, being able to segment them based off of their skills and interests, and then being able to reward them um, in order to grow your community and increase engagement and acquire new users. And like the way that, like, if you look at crypto, like billions of dollars are literally billions of dollars are spent every year on like marketing, like booths at conferences and like paying KOLs, token incentives, airdrops, grants. And like, in my view, a lot of it is like wasted. And I think that if you just look at the amount of money that's been invested in like crypto over the last like 5 years and the output, and then you consider that the, I don't know if it's the majority, but a lot of that money was spent on marketing. It's like, what are we doing here? We need more accountability and we need to be smarter about the way that we do this. And I personally think that the way to go about that is to find kind of like the high potential, high credibility people who are in your community, and then figuring out how to like engage them within your product development, within your product marketing. Like if you need help amplifying, those are people to reach out to. Like you want to follow what they're building and amplify it, and then you get them evangelizing for you. I don't want to say for free, sometimes for free. But if you are going to provide incentives like airdrops or tips or um, tipping allowances or like whatever it is, you can do it in a very rigorous way where you can be like, this person deserves an allocation because they've engaged with our app in these ways and they have this influence and they have this other experience that makes them relevant, or like we can prove that they're like relevant to our audience like quantitatively, whatever. So like it it allows people to kind of use data to allocate resources like effectively and efficiently and in a
Hey,
defensible way.
Jordan,
Yeah, so as I was explaining, the leaderboard was a user acquisition tactic where people are interested in rankings. Um, there was a gap there for understanding who has influence beyond how many followers you have, which isn't a good metric on Farcaster because of the auto follow system and for other reasons. So I built it and it generated leads for us. And I wanted those leads so I could figure out where we should focus. And what I learned is that there's a lot of demand, obviously, for like growth in general, like tools to help you grow your community, but specifically for identifying essentially influencers and micro influencers, either within your existing community or within the audience that you're trying to reach out to. And then with that knowledge on who has like influence and reputation, people also want to be able to segment and drill down based off of characteristics that are relevant to their business. So if you're a business that's trying to reach out to developers, for instance, it's very helpful to know who in your audience has built mini apps on Farcaster and like how much developer rewards they've received. But you're also interested in like how they're engaging with your community across all the different platforms that you're operating on. So like you might have a token and a channel on Farcaster and a brand account on Farcaster and a mini app, um, or multiple mini apps on Farcaster. And it's currently very difficult to stitch all that data together and get a unified view of your community. So in order to like address like this need, I determined that what a lot of people really need right now is just like raw data, like a data export or an API where they're like, I'm planning my airdrop, or I'm Noise and I'm like planning like my rewards program. Like I want you to use your reputation data to go through whatever to go through the people who are eligible based off of like the activities or interests that they have, and then essentially rank them by their influence. And then we can either use their influence um, to to allocate rewards for like the airdrop, or we can use like a combination. So for like noise, it's like they want to reward people who posted good content. So it's like, all right, let's look at all the things that got tipped by noise users, and then let's look at all the people who liked and recasted those casts, and then let's look at the reputation of those people, and then you can create like a formula that takes into account, well, how many of the people who liked it were noise like tippers, and what is their reputation, and like other segments that they might be interested in. So like right now we're doing engagements like that that are kind of like analytic consulting. But based off what we're learning in these engagements, I'm building out like the UI in the background for the immediate purpose of providing people an interface to view the data and get context on the data that I'm sharing with them. But then based off of what I learn, I can build something that's like more applicable to a broader market. So um, Quotient isn't going to be like the the type of business that's like super consumer facing, and where we're like we have like this product that like is for everyone. Like it's not really for everyone. It's for people who are at venture backed companies and are trying to grow their audience and are professional and serious about it and have budget to do it and probably have some sort of rewards program. And because of that, like we're going to be taking like a pretty B2B approach where we're working directly with these large organizations, where we're building like white labeled UIs for them. And then based off of what we learn in the future, when we have more resources and I'm not the only developer, then we can like build stuff that other people can benefit from. Not other people, but like, your smaller like indie developers. And we're trying to do that now actually by partnering with organizations that work with a lot of developers to essentially license our UI and analytics, so they can share it with the people they're working with. So like an organization like Farcaster, for instance, which is people are launching mini apps. They can kind of license our data and UI to help their builders. So that's just like some kind of context and like I guess like expectation setting. Like we're not going to be taking like a very like I don't want to say like it's not open, but like it's a very like kind of focused approach focused on venture backed startups and helping them grow their businesses and brands.
So one of the
Um,
first things that comes to mind, Jordan, sorry to cut you right there, but one of the things that comes to mind is how reliant is Quotient? Maybe at this stage, it's pretty much reliant on the Farcaster ecosystem, but looking, 5, 10 years from now at Quotient, like, is it still going to only be existing on the Farcaster platform, or are there plans and their capabilities to scale beyond that?
yeah, I mean that's a good question. In an ideal world, uh, we would do right by our existing customers and do so well. And some of them are like pretty major brands that people are familiar with, even outside of the Farcaster context. And the idea there would be to say, look, like if you're trying to grow your brand on X, like it's a disaster. And like the data isn't really open. X can deplatform you. There's a lot of like spam. Like what about Farcaster? Like it's open data, it's less toxic, and there's not as many users, but a lot of the users that are there are very high value. And using our tool Quotient, we can show you who these people are and what resonates with them. And as you grow your community, we can tell you who has potential to evangelize for your community. And you can do automated rewards programs. So like this is actually more attractive than X, and we can help you get there. So I think that there's one scenario where we can achieve like real venture scale, if Farcaster grows and we can demonstrate that like by using our platform you can grow on Farcaster and measure the ROI of your growth efforts. Um, that's what I would like, but who knows if that's going to work out. So thinking beyond like this like platform reliance dependency question essentially. It's like ideally the platforms that we'd work with would have open data that we wouldn't have to spend a bunch of money to access. Like accessing X data, for instance, is extremely expensive. If you go through them, you're going to be paying like at least 5K a month. And we would probably want more data than that. And you can work with a third party vendor, but then can you really trust that data if you're talking to like Estee Lauder and you're trying to like sell them like a 250K like deal? Like, oh yeah, we got our data from some like random company. Like, we think it's cool. We think it's like robust. It's like, it's kind of sketchy. So like looking beyond Farcaster, I think that the next platform that we want to look at is GitHub, because you have a lot of developers and builders and their API is open. There's a lot of technology companies that are trying to grow like an ecosystem for their, API, developer tooling, database solution. Um, I think that there's a path there that we could pursue, but that's probably, at least a year out from now. So, I mean, we're going to adapt to like whatever the opportunities are, but I would say that like for ideological and practical reasons, like we would want to, you know, focus on platforms with open data. There is a world where we're doing really well and we have to do X and we spend a bunch of money trying to solve for X, but it's like that's not like the future that I want.
Yeah.
And I think that the future that's good is the future where we push more brands and companies towards trying to grow on open social media platforms. So I think that's kind of like the direction that we're headed, and people are not satisfied with the pace, but um,
That
it's
is what
definitely
it
not going to
is.
happen it's definitely not going to happen if you don't try to make it happen, right?
Right. And I think the approach is definitely, you got to take risks, and the risk and the reward that comes of it is being one of the first here on Farcaster, which I would argue is probably at this point the most successful open source and decentralized platform that we have on Web3. So being like one of the earlier people here, I think that there's a reward for being early in most cases. So yeah, it may not be scaling at the pace that the legacy social media applications run at. Well, that's also because they had basically a 15-year head start, maybe even more, um, than the applications that we're using today on chain. So yeah, looking at it like that, I think you're taking the right approach, and I think it's also like the principles and values that you have. Like, I don't want to be building around a platform where I can't just be deplatformed. And the data may seem to be robust, but at the same time, like how good is it when you have all of these bots and spam and nonsense that comes with it? So I think to your point and to your credit, like being able to see the value in Farcaster at this stage, but then also the companies that are building on Farcaster at this stage and providing value to them too. So all of that's really, exciting for me. A couple of the things, just going into some of the ideas behind quotient, is the credit ranking that you're giving the users. One thing that we've talked about in the past is just how you're taking something that is, a subjective, and this is the beauty of what you all are doing, in my opinion, is the fact that you're taking something that is a subjective value, right? Like, this is what they do and this is the value that they bring. That's up for you to determine, but you're bringing an objectiveness that can be like broadly seen as value. It's not just an opinion, but more so like everyone can see the value of that credit ranking, not only from like going back to the leaderboard and seeing, oh, well, they're interacting with this, that, and the other, they're bridging. Like, I think it's really cool that right off the bat, you were able to take the data that is open to you and then starting to like play with it so that you can interpret how people are behaving on chain. Um, which is unique. We haven't been able to see that in any of the social media that we've interacted with, or at least in my lifetime. So just maybe expanding
I
on
mean,
on
you
that.
used to be able to do it on X. You could, but now it's more difficult. especially because they're hiding like likes, which is like really important. Just from like zooming out a bit, like social media like used to be predicated on like who you follow, like your MySpace top eight or whatever. And a lot of analytics are based off of like who you follow. But like the world is like much faster now. And like the most popular social media platforms, it's less about like who you follow and it's more about like how you engage with content. So it's like, what do you like? What do you comment on? What do you share? How many times do you watch the video? Like, how long do you look at the tweet? So I think that's like a pretty big shift. And our algorithm for identifying influence and reputation is really based off of like those interactions. Like if you think about how you decide who's important and who has reputation and influence, like you can say that it's subjective, and it kind of is, I guess. I personally think that everything is subjective, but it's really like, well, who does this person know? Like I know this person, I know they're important because of XYZ. And like they invited them to their party, which means that like socially speaking, like if you invite someone to your party, like they're above such and such threshold of like people that you like, respect, or trust. But then this other person I know also invited them to their party, and like they're actually dating this other person I know. That's like a really high trust signal, right? So like our algorithm is basically doing that, where we're like looking at how people interact on Farcaster, and then we're looking at like how many interactions they have from accounts that are high reputation. And then that's like the primary like ingredient for how we calculate reputation. And there's other factors like the graph is like weighted. So like a recast counts more than a like. And we focus on recent interactions versus old interactions and stuff like that. But ultimately, like it's subjective, but it's like how people understand this and do this in like the real world. Um, so that's like the base layer. Like, okay, on Farcaster, for instance, like who has influence and reputation, like let's assign them a score. We can convert that score into a rank because the rank is easier to like rock and use than a score in some cases. And then it's like, okay, so how can we like segment these people? Like, are they developers? Are they creators? Like, whatever a creator is, are they interested in like DAO governance? Are they an investor? Like, all the different things that people are essentially looking for when they want to segment people. So, and we can do this with like an existing community, but then we can also do it with someone who wants to reach out to like an audience. So I can show what both of those look like in our in development, very rough, more of a mood boards than a MVP UI. So starting with like an existing community, like we can look at quotient. Um, I haven't put in like the actual growth charts, but like first it's like, okay, like what is our community,
Is this a
where
channel or is this your following on the quotient account?
it covers people who follow the channel, it follows people who it covers people who follow our account, it follows people who hold our token, and covers people who are users of our mini apps. So it's our complete audience across all platforms. And then you can look at a directory of all those people that looks at how much influence do they have within this community of people who are connected to us through one of our platforms, their overall influence on Farcaster, their bridge rank, which is like essentially a virality measure, like how good at they how good at are they at creating content that resonates with different otherwise disconnected like clicks within Farcaster. So if I can post something that gets like the matcha people happy and the Ethereum developers happy, then I would have like high between the centrality and a hybrid rank. And then it's like, what's their level of engagement with Quotient? Like, did they add our mini app? Do they follow our account? Do they hold our token? Do they follow our channel? And like, the first step here is, as someone who is a leader in the community, you just like want to know who like these people are, right? Like, if you don't recognize a name, say I don't recognize Jeff Goldberg, I can be like, okay, here's his bio. I can look at his account on our leaderboard where I can see like, okay, like here's the people he's getting a lot of incoming attention from. Here's the people he's paying a lot of attention to, blah, blah, blah. Just get that social context that I can filter his activities, uh, filter his activities through. And with this information, like one thing that people can do is like when they're trying to promote their product or company or community or whatever, they can be like, okay, first step, who is in my community that has a lot of influence within my community that's also engaged with us already? Like maybe I can try to activate them and loop them in and get them to evangelize on our behalf instead of just like paying someone to do like sponsored content, right? So on the one hand, like, so it's like higher ROI because you're like spending less money, but then you're also like you're activating people who are aligned and like on your team genuinely already, and getting them to work for you instead of trying to get some like random person to essentially be like a mercenary for you. So like if I'm looking for people, I could like filter to the type of engagement I want, and then blah blah blah. The other thing that we're offering is like context on like the interests of people in your community. So you can kind of understand that and use that context to like engage and activate them and inform your growth strategy. So like if you look at Quotient, like there's a lot of people who are interested in Icebreaker, which is kind of like a Web3 like LinkedIn, and Clankers, Degen, Someone Build, Law and Policy, Dev. So like I look at this and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of kind of entrepreneurial people. There's a lot of people who are interested in like crypto, like networks, network analysis. There's people who are interested in law and policy, which is interesting. I'll get into later, so on and so forth. And then I can see like the personalities that resonate with people in our community. So like you could say like who are the influencers for that really resonate with our community. And they're organized based off of like how specific the engagement they get is to our community, and the overall level of engagement. So like in the top right, the people who get a lot of engagement from the community and where a lot of that engagement is specific to the community is me, which makes a lot of sense because my entire like audience and existence on Farcaster is predicated around people who are interested in me because of what I'm doing with Quotient, right? Um, and another person who kind of fits that mold is like this guy. I believe his name is Jake, but he's a CLO at Variant. Another person is Daniel Barabender, who's a GC, investment partner at Variant. And I'm not going to go through all of these people, but I will say that a lot of them are lawyers or people who work in like growth roles at venture-backed startups, right? So for us, we were like, oh, interesting. Like with lawyers specifically, like a lot of them work for venture-backed startups that have enough money to hire in-house counsel. And a lot of them are kind of entrepreneurial and want to prove their worth outside of just doing legal stuff. Like this is a good lever for us from a business development perspective. Like how can we engage these people on our behalf, right? Or when I'm trying to amplify content for Quotient and I'm using a tool like Amps, I can be like, okay, like Daniel Barbender, Miles Jennings, Cody, Khosra, like out of these people, which have turned on Amps? Because if I'm going to spend money, I should spend money on people who like quantitatively have resonance and influence with like the audience that I'm trying to reach, right? So I can be smarter about how I spend money. And then the last thing that's here is kind of just who are people in my community like following over the last like month, excluding people like say Ted or DWR or whatever, to get a sense of like, okay, like what do people find interesting? So yeah, I mean, this is kind of like a mood board almost that we can show new clients to demonstrate like this is the type of stuff that we can do. Like, how do we adapt this to like what you need? So as an example of that, um, we have a client that's really interested in reaching out to like developers on Farcaster. So we're able to like say, okay, like how do we find developers that are credible and are actually building stuff on Farcaster? People who are building mini apps. There's ways to access that data through APIs. So we built that initial audience, which is like, I believe, around 413 people or something, 417 people. You can see how much influence they have within the developer community, their overall influence on
What's
Farcaster,
Divi
whether or
Score? Is
not
that
they,
your developer community?
it's their influence like within the community of people who are like in this list. So like if you get a lot of engagement from people on this list, then your score will be higher.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And then like you can like filter by like have they won developer awards, because that's kind of like a proxy for their skill, right? And you can like see how much rewards they've earned, blah blah. You can and you can look at like the audience insights, like who are the personalities that are resonant within this group of people, like what channels are they interested in, who are they following, blah blah. And we're going to kind of build on this based off of like what our customers need to add more facets you can drill down on, and like a better way to represent the influencers who are resonant within the community than the scatter plot, which I like, but is probably not the best from a UX perspective. And at the same time, we're also evolving the back end to identify like more segments and more ways to kind of qualify people and help people identify uh, influencers, micro influencers that are relevant to their product or brand or whatever it is.
Got it. So I guess the long and short is just being able to interpret what's happening on chain and taking that information that is high signal for these channels, these brands, these companies that need to get in front of an audience. And you're doing it in an effective manner where saving them costs so they don't need to do these airdrops that are just spray and pray. They could be way more like, instead of a shotgun approach, they could be way more of like a sniper approach, and who they would be engaging, targeting in multiple facets, not just like the token aspect, but also the how would I put it, like the marketing engagement overall, like just their messaging. Hey, like we're only getting an attraction from developers. Great. We had the thought process prior to even getting this quotient data that we were like really hitting the creators, but like it's way more technical what I guess we're applicable towards. So we got to change our messaging. Like there's a lot of components that you can that you're offering that allow them to really understand not just what the audience is and not just like who's on chain, but also who they are. I mean, that's another thing that I think is interesting is like, for me with like the Startup Radar channel, obviously it's brand new. Obviously, I've only been here for 2 months, but like the thing that I would like to know about my channel, my audience, etc., is like who's actually listening, who's actually paying attention, and that doesn't come up, just on likes but like if you have the ability to see who's actually clicking in, who's seeing the channel, who's seeing the pod, like whatever, that changes my approach of how I want to address an audience. And then also like timing. When am I posting? Is that another thing that you could do too? Is like see what has been attractive in like when at the time that I posted something.
Yeah, so that's something that people have asked for, that we can provide. I haven't built it yet. But yeah, I mean, the next thing to add is really kind of components around content intelligence. So like, what is the content that you've done that like performs like the best, and who's engaging with it? Like, what type of content resonates with your community more broadly? And kind of like a timeline feature where you can like look and see like how stuff evolved over time. So like for instance, like I kind of want to go back and see like who, like how just like awareness of Quotient grew through our crowd funds. And intuitively, I'm like, well, a lot of it's probably due to Ted because she like posted about it and a lot of people engaged with it, like whatever. But like in theory, I should be able to be like, I want to look at March 3rd through March 5th and then view all of like the events on the timeline and see like someone posted about Quotient and five people added the mini app and like that type of thing. And taking a step back, like with like the business and its strategy, like I think that there's like things that are nice to haves and then there's things that are need to haves. And to like really grow, like you kind of need to be able to sell on nice to haves, I think. And I think that, for instance, deciding like your messaging and like who to reach out to and like the general, like, I need to understand my audience is really a nice to have, not a need to have. Because in theory, people can kind of do it themselves manually and like how well they do it, like, who knows? They probably could benefit from a tool like this, but it's not like a need to have. But rewards are turning into a need to have. Like you have to have like an airdrop or you have to have rewards for engagement and participation or a leaderboard or something, right? Um, or you're paying influencers directly, like mercenaries. So that's why we're kind of starting with the less UI centric and more like data focused. Like you have like this question, it involves like influence and segmentation might be helpful. Here's like the answer. And then using what we learned from those engagements to build out the nice to haves in a way that they are as close to need to haves as possible. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I think that I'm kind of drawn towards like the open ended like discovery and exploration. I think a lot of value comes from that. Like you becoming like an anthropologist expert in your community and like for instance, like if I was like the salesperson at a company or whatever, like I think that you would be expected to know like every client and every like lead and like have context on like who matters and like what the history has been and you have tools to like help you do that. But if you're good at your job, you kind of like have all that knowledge, right? So I think that personally that like everyone should have Quotient and like know every name on their directory and like that is not like spam and that like kind of matters and like their significance, right? um, and they should know like what channels these people engage with and like what they're interested in, blah blah blah. And I personally think that very transformative things happen in unpredictable ways when you have access to that information, and then you start to generate questions and blah blah. But that's like pretty hard to sell. Like, hey, like if you use this product in this way, like eventually something really cool might happen.
Yeah.
It's easier to sell like, hey, like you're about to spend like a bunch of money on some rewards program, like we can help you spend that money effectively.
No, I think that that's a tactful approach as well, where you're immediately, and this is just like sales 101 or just business model 101, where it's like, I don't need to sell you on, I like how you frame it. It's like, I'm not going to sell you on the nice to haves. Like immediately, I'm selling you on the need. Here are the nice. Let's build a relationship that's long term based on like me providing immediate value that hits a pain point right away. So to your point, rewards are now becoming an essential. So like let me help, like sitting in the seat of Quotient, let me help you provide the best airdrop that you possibly can based on the information you have here on Farcaster. Let me interpret it for you and lay the picture. Like up to you what to do with this, but here you go. This should be your target audience. Great. Boom. But then while that provides value, the retainment and the like more that they can discover and explore through Quotient is now there. So I mean, not to go too, into the weeds of like personally what's going on with quotient, but it's like, yeah, those are the things that I think any founder should really look at is like, am I really trying to like lead this conversation with, oh, this is kind of nice that I like, and it may be nice to have. That's not going to get the needle moving at all. But for you to provide that
Yeah, or
immediate
like
value, it
it
could.
might, and like there's some people who say are growing, they want to do like a consumer business, and it's like a consumer facing product, and you need like millions of people using it, and like um I mean, in theory, you should still be like kind of looking at like how people are actually using the platform, but you kind of have to like come to market with like a big vision of like this is how I think it should be, right? And like with my last startup, I was like more of an idea guy, and I was like, I have this vision, and like we should pursue this vision, and people were excited about it, which I viewed as validation, but like wasn't really validation, and then wasted a bunch of time and money. And then when we were under the gun, eventually figured out like what people were willing to pay for it and built it. And it was like, wow, like if we just did this from the beginning, then I probably would still be doing chambers. But I didn't. So this time I was like, I'm not going to like present like a vision of like what I think things should be like. I want to figure out like what people actually need, and then like prove that like we can help them. And that's like very putting aside that being like a good business practice, and putting aside the fact that that's heavily influenced by the fact that I haven't raised money yet and have been under a lot of pressure to like get this to work, which probably has been very helpful. It's like very rewarding to like actually do something that someone finds useful, and where they're like, wow, like this solved a real problem that I have, and like this is really helpful. Like it's very, very rewarding. So that's like kind of the feeling that I'm chasing of like, oh, like I actually like made someone stay. And like this is someone who's like doing something which is very hard, which is finding distribution and growth for their products. And like I'm a product person. Like in my ideal world, I would just kind of like build stuff, but that doesn't really work. So yeah, it's like I really want to like develop a reputation for providing people with like information that they use and where they can point to it and be like, I did this, and then I was able to like generate this much on chain activity, or like grow my community by this many people, or like whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I think
But
so.
at the same time, like I don't want to tell people what to do.
No, for
So
sure.
it's a needle to thread.
The thing that, just pointing out a couple of things, I think it's funny, well, interesting rather, that when you were in your first startup, the approach was, I have a vision and I'm going to tell people, just like you finished your statement there, is like, I'm going to tell people what they want and like what they need. And while it got people excited and people wanted to support that and be a part of it, the reality is like, did they actually need it? It's what you thought they did, but then instead taking a new approach, going to like starting quotient, it's like, I'm immediately just going to provide value, and I know what they need at this point, and I'm going to like provide that. But that gives you a runway where you can go, once you have the foundation of providing that value for customers, then you could say, well, what is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that I want to provide value for my customers? Now that I'm building these relationships and getting these clients, now you can have the runway to then say, I can explore this. I have a vision for that, while still having that like bread and butter and that foundation of providing value that also just transparently keeps the lights on for quotient. So like, it's not this like, it's just not this like, I hope this works type of thing, where it's like, I've got meat on the bone still, but I'm actually like, I don't know, providing value while still exploring my passion.
Yeah, I mean, like it's funny because businesses are ostensibly for other people, but a lot of people are motivated professionally by like satisfying some need that they have personally. Like they want to be, they view themselves as an entrepreneur, and they're like, I need to build a business because I want to be a rich entrepreneur, right? Not like I want to build a business because I want to like, help such. Some people actually are like, oh, I really care about this problem personally, and like my brother died from like this disease, and I'm going to start a company, or in like a case of one of my cousins, like become like a PhD researcher on this disease to solve the problem. And, thank God we have people like that. But a lot of people are like, I want to satisfy some need that I have. And like, yeah, like I'm personally very interested in like open data and helping people grow. And I do have a vision for how I think Quotient can work. But what I'm finding is that like you could have like the broad strokes, right? But the details are very hard to like guess. So when it comes to our data, I actually have a very specific vision for what I want to build. And I built ahead of demand on the data infrastructure side. And I would say that I was like kind of right. Like I was like, we need reputation scores. I'm going to build a little app that shows people reputation scores. And that's generated a lot of leads and business for us. But you kind of have to like, it has to be like a conversation, right? Like, I think that, you should understand your community's like interests and skills. There's a lot of labels that you could have to categorize people, but I haven't actually ingested a lot of them because I want to have the capacity and attention to focus on like what clients really need. And the first thing that someone was willing to pay for label wise was, are they a developer, right? And that wasn't at the top of my list for things I wanted to ingest. It was like kind of close to the top, but I was going to do other stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, just getting clients who like actually care about the topic and are actually going to engage with the data and come back to you with like requests and questions that you can solve for is like where you want to be. And if you look at Privy, for instance, like that was their whole thing. Like they were not growing that quickly. And then they had Friendtech as a customer and got very hands-on with supporting Friendtech and like Blackbird and some other companies based off of like what they actually needed and requested. And it just got bought for probably close to $1 billion off of, I don't want to speculate, but like probably not like as much revenue as you would traditionally see for a company that got bought for that much, right? So like, or Nanar. Nanar is like known for being extremely responsive to customer requests. And like, I've seen documentation created by their team that's like based off of like issues that I experienced like weeks ago, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the companies that get very hands-on and really care about the success of their customers are the ones that do best. So I'm trying to orient us towards growing towards like what our customers like really need and are willing to pay for.
Well said. Well said. I mean, yeah. So with that said, I think there's a lot of opportunity and upside that Quotient brings. It doesn't seem like it a day, like some days when you're on Farcaster and there's like, not that the community at all has any pessimism. I mean, it's like the lore of Farcaster just being like Christian rap. Like that is the lore of like, that is the like ethos of Farcaster. I don't know if you've seen that, but like people are just like, comparing it, if you the analogy being like hardcore like gangster rap is X, like you get Christian rap on Farcast, or like everyone is
Pretty funny.
yeah, I don't know if you've seen that pop out, but like, but what I was getting at is, within Farcasters, there's some days that are kind of like, I don't know, deflating when you don't see big brands, you don't see big, but that's okay. You just keep building anyway, and eventually they're going to come. And we're seeing that. I think like, I forget who the person was that just got deplatformed on X and came onto Farcasters, like, guess I'm Farcaster now. And it's just like, it's those little victories that keep me motivated because it's just like, it's the death by a thousand paper cuts. The more that these big legacy media and legacy tech, like legacy whatever, all the old ways of doing things, they're shooting themselves in the foot and don't realize that that's just opening up the gates for us to succeed and win their business over, win their time over. So I think
Yeah,
Quotient.
dude, it's kind of like Andor and the rebellion. Like
You want
the empire,
to
the empire is
and
very powerful, but it's like corrupt
yeah,
and like trending down. And to me, the question is just like, are you personally going to make it, or are you going to end up as one of the people who are martyred for the cause? And that's kind of like a risk. Like,
yeah.
maybe Quotient doesn't become like, you know a truly like venture scale business and I have to like pivot or like whatever. But in the long term, like Farcaster and this approach will like probably work out.
I think
But if you're
so.
not willing to like give it your all and risk that it doesn't go the way that you want, it's definitely not going to happen.
That's
And
what
yeah, just like patient, yeah,
that's what I was
and
just
like
saying, dude. I think Quotient is primed for success in whatever you want to deem success as. If it's going to be this massively scaled, entity, great. That's successful. But I also think just being a part of the like movement and finding your niche within that, I think that in itself is success, and that's what is definitely, you know, on track for you.
yeah, I mean, if you can provide people like with real value that they're willing to pay for, and that it's not just like they have like a corporate card and they're like, yeah, this seems like kind of cool, but where they're like, yeah, I actually need this and I'm going to advocate for money to be spent here. Like that's actually pretty rare, right? So like if you follow like demand and like what people are willing to pay for and you provide something that they actually really want to pay for, I think that's like something to just like hold on to and like follow. And like with Farcaster and like with just building stuff more generally, I think people need to like just adjust their like expectations a bit. Like not every day. Like if you look at things that are successful, like X, like I just went to X and there was a lot of just like bullshit, like engagement farming, like boring stuff. Or if you go on Instagram or TikTok, like 90% of what you see, you're kind of like, yeah, this is like kind of lame. Like, but then there's 10% where you're like, oh, this is actually really cool. And the world runs in that 10% because
That's
like
right.
maybe I go buy something, right? Or maybe I find like a job, or maybe I do something that matters, right? But there's not a lot of stuff that actually matters. So yeah, I mean, I've had to like train myself to be like, for instance, I was afraid to show data to clients because I was like, well, what are they gonna like make of this? Like maybe they're gonna be upset and like it doesn't look very good for them. And it's like, yeah, but like maybe out of those 500 people in their community, like two people really matter and they should engage those two people. And then one of them does something which gets them to the next level.
That's right.
So yeah, just like trying to reorient my mind towards like there's actually not that much stuff that matters, and a lot of stuff is kind of boring and like whatever. But you just have to be prepared to capitalize on like that one thing that matters a week or month or year, and that can be like what really matters and moves the needle for you in the industry or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the way that just made me think, it's like an artist or a musician that's afraid to show their creative, piece. And it's kind of like for you, the data is like your art, where you're trying to find a way to innovate and share that in a valuable way. And yeah, it's pretty vulnerable for you to put yourself out there and say, "This is what I've been working on. This is what I think is going to be of value to you. What do you think?" So, no, I mean, but from what I've seen, obviously, like from the conversations we've had, I think you're putting yourself in a great situation for success. And I think, people will start hearing the name Quotient a lot more, with all of the involvement you've had with some of these clients that are probably yet to be revealed yet. But man, as a friend and like as a person that's just been able to see even the past couple of weeks how much you've been able to grow and learn and just go after it with, absolute, cojones, man. It's been really exciting to watch. I'm so pumped to see what Quotient does here in the future. And yeah, man, you obviously know you're welcome here anytime. I apologize for the glitching and all of the stuff that was happening with Riverside. But yeah, what before we sign off here, what are some of the things that you have lined up? If there's anything that you'd like to share of like coming up, anything to be on the lookout for?
So we're working with Noise to help them with their rewards program. We're going to be working with Farstore, and like the guys behind Farstore, the guys who build Tippin,
Yep.
to help them support people who are working with them. Uh, and then we have some other contracts. Like there's one pretty exciting one that just is taking a long time to go through kind of like DAO bureaucracy. But I think that if we, I think that will probably go through, and when that goes through, I think that'll be really good for us. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing over the next, say, like 3 to 6 months is going to be very B2B, focused on specific clients that are venture backed. And, hopefully I want to raise money. Um, maybe will, maybe won't. Um, but once we have more resources, whether that's through revenue or raising money, then I envision pushing out mini apps that are little experiences that like leverage our data in fun ways for people, or providing incentives for other developers to do that with our data. So for instance, like a mini app that tells you like, here's 3 new people who joined Farcaster in the last 2 months who you should follow, right? Or we build a little research assistant before that you could like ask a question like, who were the best like NFT collectors on Farcaster, and would give you an answer. So I guess that's probably the thing that would be most relevant to like the average person that we want to work on. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of contingent on how quickly we can put money in the
Make that
bank.
money. It's always about that, man. Well, no. I'm sure things are about to happen here very soon, and one of the coolest parts about it is the fact that you're bootstrapped. I think of it like I think of it as a rite of passage, man. And the innovators and the creators that are here, one of the trends that I see through all of their stories is just like being told no countless amounts of times and just flipping the bird themselves and saying, I'm going to do it anyway. And a lot of them come out on top at the end of it and say, I told you so. And those VCs are begging to get on their cap table saying, please, like, take my money. And they're like, don't need to. Already making enough revenue, already generating enough growth. Like, we see promise, and this is why. And I think that there's a lesson in that too. And I think that there's an opportunity for you to be able to like have that, either way, like either take the money, or I still think like with Quotient, there may be a situation where you won't even need to take money in a couple of months. So with that said, yeah, I'm very bullish and optimistic on all the things that you're building. And I think success is coming your way, however you want to measure it. But I think in your way of looking at it, I think you're going to catch a lot of success.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate, you having me on, and you do a very good job with Startup Radar. And I hope to be able to kind of take the same energy and discipline and organization that you put into organizing your podcast, running the channels, into our sales and growth.
I need your
And
help,
so I
man.
find it, I find it, I find it inspiring. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this evolves.
Likewise, man. All good things coming. But Jordan, I appreciate you. I know you have a hard stop, and I think we may have gone over, but I really do appreciate you making the time, man.
Yeah, dude, anytime.
You're the man. Peace.